Hello and welcome to the Spearo podcast, the show where we interview spearfishing experts, authorities and characters from around the world. To become a better Spearo, come and join our spearfishing community at noobspearo.com.
I wanted to share awesome experiences that you can have when you are in the water, and that's why I started spearfishing.
I just clamped down on the reel and got drugged down to about 50 feet, and I'd never had a battle like that before in my life.
So when you're learning where to hunt and find fish, they're the hot spots. That's where fish want to be.
Don't overcomplicate your gear. Don't go diving dressed up like a Christmas tree.
I actually started off in stubbies with a bloody belt with a pig knife on it.
And they've seen this big fin break the surface, roll into the water, look down, here's this nice big great white.
Once your face hits the water and you feel relaxed and all the other stresses of life seem to disappear.
It's a whole new world and it's mysterious, it's magical.
Oh wow, it's just indescribable.
Today we're speaking with Texas-based Spearo Ben Choi. Ben Choi is a specialist at diving oil rigs and man-made structure, so we talked to him all about the do's and don'ts of diving these structures. We also talked to him about his Blackout event. Last year he experienced a blackout whilst diving one of these rigs. Pretty scary moment. So he tells us and shares with us all about the what's come about from that and how he's changed his diving. All right, so enjoy the show.
We interrupt this Spearo interview to bring you some shout-outs and a news bulletin.
G'day guys, quick public service announcement. Adreno has got their famous Easter sale on. Now I love this as a true blue tight ass. This is when I do most of my shopping. So Adreno's got major savings across the board. All your Rob Allen gear, pretty much everything in store has got some sort of discount of it. I love it. That's when I shop. Shrek, you love it because you're an even bigger tight ass. The best thing about it is they can save not only on the sale, but if you're checking out online, use the Noob Spearo. What is it? A coupon? What is it?
It's just a code. There's a code spot in there. Just chuck in Noob Spearo, save $20 on all purchases over $200.
And for all our European and US friends, you've really got to take advantage of the low Aussie dollar at the moment. Like, you've got big savings to make there with that low Aussie dollar. So get online, check them out, save yourself a bundle.
Huge range of gear, all the best stuff, all the brands. Yeah, so www.spearfishing.com.au to enjoy that Easter sale and take advantage of some of those rock bottom prices and use the code NoobSpearo to save $20 on all purchases over $200. Get in on it.
Get in on it.
G'day listeners, today joining us from Galveston, Texas is Ben Choi, a bloke who came on Noob Spearo's radar via the Freedivers Facebook page with a video and a story about Samba and Blackout. In this YouTube footage, Ben and a few friends are chasing mangrove snapper beneath an oil rig in about 70 feet or 20 metres of water. Ben, have I got sort of those details right there?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so that Ben story on YouTube's received over 120,000 views, and wow. I think it's brought a lot of awareness to the spearfishing and freediving community about hyperventilation and blackout in general, and it was really good of Ben to share that story with everyone. So welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you for having me.
G'day, Ben. It's Turbo here, mate. Just to get started, why don't you fill us in with your background? Like, where and how did you get started spearfishing?
So I started spearfishing about 9 years ago out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I actually been fishing a lot in my entire life since middle school, since I was about 13 or 12. And I had always been wanting to catch some lobster. So when I moved to the east coast of Florida, to Fort Lauderdale, I started lobstering actively. And I noticed, when I started catching these lobster, which I wasn't very good at catching, by the way, the antennas would break off and all these hogfish would come in. And then I thought to myself, well, hogfish are pretty good to eat. So I should start bringing a spear gun with me. So, I started bringing a spear gun with me. I started out with a 42 AB Biller commercial spear gun,
Wow.
Yeah.
And, top of the line stuff.
Wow. I haven't even heard of it before,
No,
dude.
man,
I'm sitting there going, 42 AV Biller.
It's the same thing as our Sea Hornets. They look the same. Timber, bit of plastic on each end.
Yeah.
That's where I started too, man. So I know what you're going through.
It's a metal tube with a muzzle and a mechanism.
Wow.
Beautiful.
That sounds rough.
So you started hunting hogfish after that. How'd you go with that?
My first hogfish I shot was 13 inches, and I thought I was amazing, and I was so happy. I took it back and I cooked it up, hogfish honestly has been my favorite fish to spear ever since then. I've shot all sorts of fish, but to me, hogfish is my favorite fish to spear right now, and since then.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, they're an awesome looking fish, aren't they?
Oh, they're fantastic. We don't get anything like that down here. No. We have sort of some comparable species that we love to chase as well, Ben, but they're a really iconic fish for your particular part of the world, I think.
And they're really good to eat is what I really get out of the whole thing. I mean, the meat is as white as a piece of paper.
Wow.
It's pure white meat. You compare it to a snapper meat, I mean, the snapper looks gray and the hogfish looks white.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, wow.
Right, so we chatted about your crap spear gun. What other sort of obstacles and challenges did you face when you got started?
I didn't have a boat, so I started posting on a website called Spearboard.
Okay.
I'm sure a lot of Spearos are familiar with that, and I started doing a lot of shore diving off of the beach, which I was very fortunate able to do that off of Fort Lauderdale. Fort Lauderdale has some great shore diving, and you can pretty much walk in the water almost anywhere and swim about 100 yards, and you'll be able to shoot hogfish and mutton snapper and dog snapper and all sorts of stuff. So I was very fortunate to start in a good environment, and so through Spearboard I met a bunch of guys who use kayaks to get out to the deeper reefs, and we went out with. I was able to bum a kayak with a couple guys every other weekend and go out there, and I started diving deeper, and starting to get more experience with my hunting, and getting more bottom time and stuff like that, and just being able to observe how these guys did it, and how they were able to stalk the fish and really just swim against the current, swim against the 3-knot current, and still be able to shoot fish and still breathe up. So,
wow.
That was some pretty amazing stuff that these guys had.
They sound like alpha male mentors, though. That'd be terrible for Turbo.
It sounds flat there, though. Is it flat water?
It's relatively flat. I mean, Florida is a pretty flat. I mean, it's compared to Texas. Texas is very windy. I think we probably have between 60 to 80 fishable days a year in Texas. And compared to Florida, we probably have maybe 250 diveable days a year.
Oh, that's awesome. It does sound good to me. Clear water, 100 yards off the coast.
Yeah,
flat water. I'm not getting seasick.
Sounds good as.
Yeah, I'll come for a visit. Yeah, sounds good.
Doesn't sound too bad, huh?
No, that sounds good.
We're coming for a visit, man. We're already locked in. We're staying at your place. This is why we do the podcast, Ben. All right. Could you share with us a story of your first? I mean, you did share with us the story about that 13-inch hogfish, but I mean, have you got another sort of memorable fish that you'd love to share the story about?
Yeah, actually, I've shot a lot of fish and a lot of different types of trophy fish, but one really big trophy that sticks out in my mind is when I was getting into spearfishing, I shot like a 26-inch hogfish, which is a pretty big hogfish, probably 8 or 9 pounds, in 30 feet of water right off the beach, 100 yards off the beach. It's not like you're not supposed to be there.
Wow, that's cool.
It's not supposed to be there. People go to the Bahamas or go to the middle grounds, 140 foot of water on scuba. People do that around here, for that kind of stuff. But people go to the Bahamas for 10-pound hogfish. They run 120 miles just to shoot a 10-pound hogfish. But, it's to be able to shoot that in 30 foot of water. I used to have a setup where I would tow a boogie board and I'd cut out a hole with a bucket, like a 5-gallon bucket, to put my fish and lobster in, and then I also put a dive flag so I never got run over by a boat. And I tow it behind me, and it wouldn't even fit in the bucket.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
wow.
Sweet. That's a good day out.
Yeah, I mean, I've shot bigger fish since then, but that first big hogfish, man, like when it's not supposed to be there and you're not expecting it, I don't know. There's something about not having high expectations and coming back with a big fish.
So you've shot a world record with a pole spear, is that right?
I have. I got a Jack Crevalle, which is kind of a trash fish. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit it. It's a trash fish. Actually, it's not kind of a trash fish. It is a trash fish. But they fight like hell, you know.
Yeah.
And when I shot it, it was in 350 feet of water. I dove down about 30 feet, and I stuck the closest one to me. And, you know, it just happened to be big enough to be a world record. But as I shot it, I didn't get a very good shot on it. I went through and through to the gills, and it didn't slow down. And any jacks, I'm sure you guys have jacks over there.
Yep.
You know, they fight like hell. And it went straight down to the bottom. And I only had a 70-foot float line. And so I started pulling on it. And I pull. And as I was bringing it up, and it was pretty murky that day. It was like 20-foot visibility. As I start pulling it up to about 20 foot, 25 foot, I see this really sharp nose shark pursuing it. And I was like, that's a mako.
Oh, no.
So I like drop everything. I was like, I'm not getting bit for a Jack Crevalle. Like, I don't want to die for this, you know? So I just drop it, and like, I was like, no, I'm done. So I let it, you know, swim around for a little bit, and I was like, go ahead and eat it if you want, Mako. Like, go ahead. And then, you know, maybe 5 minutes later, I just pulled it up, and
the Mako wasn't interested in you.
The Mako was not interested in me.
No one's interested in it.
He just liked you, Ben, I reckon.
Yeah, I mean, God, I wouldn't want to eat one of those things either, you know.
What did that fish weigh in at?
I do believe it was 24 pounds, and somebody recently beat it, and I'm going out very soon.
You got to get that record back, man.
That's
you know
your
what?
title.
I'm actually looking at the trophy in front of me. It's on my desk. It's actually today, January 19th to the day is the day I shot it.
Oh, so it was a year ago. Wow.
Yeah, exactly a year ago.
You can't let this slip away, mate. You got to hold your title.
You know, he only beat it by 4 pounds, so I feel pretty confident. I'm really targeting the trash can slam, if that's what we call it. You know, catfish, Jack Crevalle.
You're a prestigious kind of bloke, aren't you?
You know, I'm a true trophy hunter.
Win's a win.
We were actually going to do the same thing with the fish over here, because like the pole spear records for some of the Australian species are very approachable.
Yeah,
and
or non-existent, even better.
Yeah, so we're actually probably going to look into that as well if we ever dig the pole spear out. Yeah, well, we've got to pull the cobwebs off it because no one ever wants to use the friggin' thing.
Yeah.
Man, it's frustrating.
Yeah,
I hate it,
big
mate.
time.
Honestly, you have no idea the relationship I have with this extremely expensive piece of carbon fibre in my shed. Oh, man.
And the funny thing is, Ben, he started off with these grand ideas about how good he was going to be with it and all these world records he was going to take down. And he used it twice. I think he packed like a couple of big wobblies. And that was it.
I will say this: we've got a mate, Ben Harper, so a shout out to him, and he's very handy with the pole spear. And I think he's got a $40 pole spear, and I've got a $400 pole spear. And he can hit anything with his pole spear. Like, he's unreal with the bloody thing. And he's like, man, when are you going to sell me that pole spear? And I was like, you are never buying my pole spear off me ever.
You know, it's like throwing a toothpick at fish. Sometimes I feel like.
Yeah. Seems to move really slowly too.
I actually got one custom made for me, and I really like it. It's made out of aluminum. It's not carbon fiber because the carbon fiber breaks a little bit too easily in the Bahamas on the big grouper.
Okay,
but I like this new one, and it's what I shot the world record with, and it's held up for 2 years now. So
the Jack Crevalle killer.
Yeah,
cool,
and soon to be catfish killer.
Nice.
That's terrible.
All right, so moving on, Ben, your hunting technique. What's your favourite spearfishing hunting technique, and how do you apply it effectively?
You know, one thing I've learned a lot of is on the rigs with these mangrove snapper. You've seen it in that Blackout video. And I use it a lot is I call it waving at them, but it's, you know, you kick down to about 10 or 15 feet above where the snapper are holding, and you kind of just do a really slow sink, you know, because you're already in your sink phase by then.
Yeah.
And you stick. I have white gloves, and I reach my left hand out because I shoot with my right hand, and I reach my left hand out and I kind of just wave at them, and I kind of move my fingers around and move my hand around and you know, flex my fingers kind of, and the snapper here love it. I mean, they're so, it's like they be swimming away from you 1 second and they just turn right around and just swim towards you. I don't know. They really love it.
So what do you call that? Have you got a name for it? You guys?
Just waving at fish.
Oh, mate, I thought you would have named it after yourself, actually.
I reckon Ben might be just like he's selling us a tool one here.
Yeah,
so all the Aussie guys are like in YouTube videos, and we're like doing the Queen wave at fish. I can just see it.
In white gloves. Does it have to be white gloves?
You know, I think the white really stands out in the water. I've tried it with gray or black gloves. It doesn't seem to work as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it's also very applicable with our gag grouper in Florida. I use the same technique, and it's just a very slow drop. You know, you don't bomb the bottom. You know, we only spearfish in probably 45 to 60 foot of water in Florida, so we're not super deep.
Yeah.
So you can kind of bomb the bottom a little bit and get down and shoot one and pop back up. You know,
okay.
If you just sink down really slow and get in your sink phase and get kind of comfortable, the gag grouper for some reason they just like dropping like things that drop in the water column, and they just look at you and just shoot them through the head.
And then you just give them a wave, and the poor old fish friend swims over to give you a greeting back, and you shoot it.
That's one in the head.
All right, cool.
That's really interesting. We haven't heard that at all. I mean, we talked to Chris Coates, and he was talking about sort of grunting at them as these sort of species as they swim in the opposite direction. So now we've got grunting and waving. So that's going to look pretty good for us.
That's interesting. It's interesting. I've tried the grunting. It doesn't work very well for me.
Really?
Yeah, he was very specific about how to sort of employ the technique. He was he was talking about, like, with snapper, you don't make any noise while they're looking at you, and then you know, when they do start looking at you, goes full silent, and you know, he was pretty interesting. But then he had a different take on pelagics as well. So we're going to mix it up. We're going to try waving and grunting next time. All right, Ben. I mean, we talked about it before the show started, but you know, like, you've become quite well known for a Blackout video that's on YouTube. It's got over 120,000 views, and it's quite memorable. You and some friends were diving a oil rig. Where was that? Was that off Texas as well?
Yeah, it's off Corpus Christi, Texas.
Okay.
There's a lot of oil rigs off of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. You know, and there's actually a declining amount because they're starting to cut them off as a navigational hazard to ships. But I think they should leave them. I mean, they're tremendous ecosystems.
Yeah.
You know, there's enormous amount of coral growth, enormous amount of fish holding on them. You know, it's a real tragedy when they blow one up, because you see the pictures and there's thousands and thousands of snapper that just come up, you know, to the surface when they blow it up.
Oh, wow.
It's a real tragedy. So there's there's a couple foundations working who have been trying to turn the rigs into reefs. But they're really, really amazing ecosystems.
Yeah, definitely.
So how old are these things? Like, how long have they been there?
You know, I don't exactly know, but I would venture to say that the oil boom off of Texas happened in 1950. So I would not be surprised if some of these rigs were 40 to 30 years old, maybe even older. Mm. And they've just been sitting down there collecting, you know, coral and barnacle growth and just holding fish. The good part about these rigs is that, you know, Texas has a mud bottom, so there's no natural bottom really to the Texas or Louisiana. There's not a lot of ledges and coral growth on the bottom. There's a little bit, but not very frequent. Not like off of Florida or Australia, you know, like you guys have. So these rigs have really turned, you know, into the coral reefs of Texas and Louisiana. And so, you see queen angelfish, barracuda, little Graysby grouper, strawberry grouper, all sorts of really cool stuff. And it's just a real shame that they're cutting them off.
So with your scary moment on that rig, you can see a few of those different species in there. But I mean, could you share with us sort of the story about what happened to you on that day?
Yeah, sure. It just happened like any other day. We were just going out and spearfishing the usual rigs that we were usually hitting. We're about 130 foot of water, but we're not usually going down that deep. And these rigs, there's a tremendous amount of structure, to support what's going on, what the oil companies need to do. It's a lot of cross members and a lot of platforms at depth, and it's just a lot of structure to get hung up on. So I had been doing, I think it was my 13th or 14th drop of the day. You can really see it on the YouTube video, my YouTube video, but
I'll link it up in the show notes so people can use it as reference. But
yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but the previous dive that I did, and we had been diving deep. Usually these snapper, when you roll up to a rig, the first 2 snapper you take off of the rig are super easy. They're really dumb. You shoot them at 35 feet and you haul ass up to the surface and you're fine. And then after that, they go down to about 60, and then you shoot 1 or 2 more at 60 feet, and then they'll go down to about 85 feet. And that's close to the bottom, and they don't like going any deeper than that because there's a murk layer on the bottom, and they can't really see in that murk layer. So they like to stay in that clean water. And so my buddy Sterling had just shot a mangrove snapper. He went back to the boat, and I did the previous dive to 66 feet, and I came up and I felt fine. I saw the snapper down there. I got close to them. I just didn't feel like pulling the trigger. I came up, and then he got back in the water, came over to me, and he went down. I was doing my breathe up, so he went down, and he shot a pretty big one. He's a much better spearfisherman than me, so he can dive a lot deeper and shoot a lot more fish than me. But I was just hanging out on the surface, spotting him. He came up fine, and he had a big fish. Stone did, of course, and right,
yeah, I know,
probably like an 8 or 9 pound snapper. It was a very healthy snapper, and he goes, "All right, I'll stay around and watch you one more drop if you want to do one more drop." And then so I said, okay. So I did about a 4-minute breathe up before, and hindsight's 20/20. And everything I've seen on the internet and everything, I guess I hyperventilated about 7 times before I did my drop. Okay. And I went down. Everything seemed fine. I felt very comfortable. Maybe I pulled the trigger a little bit late in my breath hold, but nothing too extensive. I went down to 71 feet, which is not too deep for anything that I'd done that day. I've been doing high 60s, low 70s all day, and came up and shot the. So I went down, shot the fish, and I fought it, and it was going straight for one of the structures, so I had to fight it all the way up, and that's one of the biggest problems is having to fight these fish and looking up to make sure you don't hit your head on a cross beam, because that really hurts and cut your head open. Yeah. I mean, just think about these cross beams are covered in barnacles, they'll just tear you up.
Yep.
So you always gotta look up, and that's not the best conditions for freediving. You always want to keep your head tucked, but you have to look up or else cut your head open.
Yep.
And so I guess right about 20 feet to 15 feet from the surface, I knew I was in trouble. But and I get that, inhaling, exhaling kind of feeling in your nose. I panicked. I knew I panicked. And the last thing I remember was about 1 foot below the surface when I exhaled. And the next thing I remember is just waking up, and Sterling is just like tapping me like, "Hey, wake up, wake up, wake up." And I'm like, what are you doing, man? Get off of me. Like quit being weird. Like, like, come on. Yeah. I'm fine, I just had some water in my mouth. Like, quit being weird, And and he goes, man, you just blacked out. And I'm like, no, I didn't black out. Like, come on, I just had some water in my mouth. I was trying to get rid of it, And he's like, no, you blacked out. And I was like, no. I'm like, well, he's like, well, let's just go back to the boat and watch the footage on the GoPro. And he had my mask off within 2 seconds. You can see the video. It's probably as textbook of a blackout recovery as anybody can get.
He did really well.
A lot of people call it Samba because he was that close to me. He had me breathing within seconds. But I'm sure you can see the video, and I start sinking. The GoPro is mounted pretty high on my forehead, and it goes below the waterline, and I knew if I had, because I had no air in my lungs. I knew if he was not there, I knew I would have sank and definitely died. So.
Well, I'm glad you're here with us today, Ben. So, what sort of lessons did you get out of it, and what's some of the feedback you might have got from other guys that they learned out of it?
As far as feedback, it's very exposing posting a video on the internet.
Definitely.
For the entire spearfishing, freediving world community to critique and comment on.
Yep.
And I was very hesitant too at first. Actually very, very hesitant because I knew what was going to happen. But, I thought to myself, if something like this can happen to me on a normal dive, I need to make people aware of it. And I need to make sure that they know that anything, like it can happen.
Yeah.
So I really think, as far as the hyperventilating is concerned, I did it, but I don't know if that ultimately contributed to the end blackout. But I think the biggest takeaway story, besides all the other stuff that everybody says, is to dive with a buddy next to you. To always have somebody watching your back when you come up and making sure that you come to the surface, take your recovery breaths and are like, okay, I'm fine.
I like it.
Without that, I don't think I'd be here right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I think that's the ultimate thing. You can dive however you want. You can critique my diving, kicking patterns or wading method or, whatever. My head's been so screwed up since this whole thing, just thinking of all the different comments that people said. So some people said I didn't inhale the breath in my mask enough, or all sorts of crazy stuff. But
yeah.
The bottom line, it comes down to you need to have somebody there at the surface for you. Because
I like your takeaway, man. I think that's great.
You can do all those things wrong. You can do all those things wrong, but if you black out on the surface and you don't have a buddy there, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, sweet. All right, so I've put down, just like to put some takeaways in the show notes. I've put in there, yes, maybe there was some hyperventilation involved and, some recovery breathing techniques. If you know how to do it, that can help you as well when you're in a Samba or blackout situation. But the biggest one we got out of it was what I've written down here is dive with a buddy. It works, and he can save your life. So
yeah, absolutely. That's like the biggest thing since I've had the blackout. I bought a freediver's recovery vest. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that product.
Yeah, it's a Terry Mars thing, isn't it?
Yes. And it's not only just because I want to be self-sufficient. At the same time, obviously, I'll still dive with a buddy, but it's just that added level of safety, and it kind of just keeps my mind quiet as far as the whole blackout situation has gone, because it's been a struggle to get back to 70 feet. I've been freediving a few times since then. I've been out diving, and I still haven't crossed 70 feet yet since the incident. So okay. It's all in my head. I know it's all in my head. Every dive I come up, I feel fine, but at the same time, it's always in the back of my head.
No, well, thanks for sharing that story with us again. Those recovery vests from Terry Mars, what are they worth sort of retail over there in the US?
I think he retails them for $1,500.
$1,500. Okay. It's a big investment, isn't it?
I agree. I mean, you can get You get a lot of wetsuits for that much.
Yeah. We're going to try and get Terry on the show. We'd like to talk more about the recovery vest, but
He
thanks.
just came out with a third version.
Okay, I'll link that up in the show notes anyway. So cool.
All right, we might move on to the Veterans Vault. Guys, if you're after more podcast action, go and check out our mate Jason Selms over at AustralianHuntingPodcast.com.au. He talks all things hunting, shooting and fishing. It's a great listen. He's getting plenty of downloads. He's big in Canada, South Africa, even Japan. It's fantastic. Jason talks to experts in the field on all things shooting, hunting and fishing. It's really, really good listen. So go and check him out, AustralianHuntingPodcast.com.au.
The Australian Hunting Podcast is the only hunting, shooting and fishing podcast radio show in Australia. With over 40,000 downloads per month, you are sure to find some information that can help you. If you love hunting, shooting, fishing and a little bit of politics, the Australian Hunting Podcast has you covered. To listen, check us out on iTunes and visit australianhuntingpodcast.com.au.
All right, so the Veterans Vault is the segment of the show where we like to ask our guests to go deep into a specific area of their expertise, and we're going to stick with the theme of diving oil rigs. So, first thing, Ben, sort of where would you, when you drive an oil rig, sort of explain that structure under the water for us?
Okay, so a lot of people think of oil rigs as above the surface, but what is above the surface? It's like an iceberg. What's above the surface is so much less compared to what is below the surface. It's kind of a pyramid structure, and they need pipes to go down and casing so they can pump the oil back up. And there's two types of oil rigs. There's fixed oil rigs, which are what we usually dive, and there's floating oil rigs, which are in very deep water and they're tethered to the bottom, but they're floating still. And that's where a lot of our pelagics, our tuna, our wahoo, mainly tuna though. That's where the tuna and marlin, that's where the big fish are. And those are usually in over 1,000 feet of water. Our fixed oil rigs, range from, I'd say anywhere from 800 to 3 feet of water. And usually the oil rigs that we hit, it's very visibility dependent for us out of Texas. Wherever you find good visibility, that's kind of where you start diving. So we could start anywhere between 90 to maybe 130 feet, and usually somewhere around there, the visibility will be okay. But like I said earlier, there's a tremendous amount of structure. There's a tremendous amount of growth on these oil rigs, and all the fish are just so keyed in on where the structure is and where the pipes are and where so there's platforms that that they have running parallel to the sea bottom that are just a lot of structure, and that's where we get some of our grouper, and that's where some of our snapper like to play. That's usually at 45 feet. We call that the first cross beam, because that's where the first structure is below the sea level.
Yep.
And then usually the second cross beam is somewhere around 60 to 65 feet, and the third cross beam is somewhere around 85 feet. And so when we go down and shoot a fish, it scares all the other fish, obviously. And then they usually push down for cross beam to cross beam.
And so just to give me an idea, all right, say you're heading out in the boat, how far are they offshore, and are there several close together? Like if you're heading out in the boat, can you hit like 3 or 4 of these in a day, or are they much
it depends
further apart?
It depends on where you are. But where we go, our usual path is northwest out of Corpus Christi, and so these oil rigs we run about 25 miles, which isn't very far for Texas spearfishing, but because of our northwest track and the way that Texas is shaped on the curve, we're actually only about 9 to 13 miles offshore.
Right.
So the shelf drops off pretty quickly. But some of them are within state waters, which is 9 miles, and that's kind of a big deal for us because then we can shoot red snapper off of these oil rigs, and those are really good, tasty fish.
Yeah, right. And so you dive in these rigs, and you've got like three levels of fish. What about do you guys use burley to bring those fish up levels, up in the water column?
We can. I've never had the need to. I guess we should probably start doing that.
Oh, no. What have I done?
Tune into the Noob Spearo podcast, episode 21, to get a really good insight into effective use of burley.
Shameless. Love it.
The problem is usually that the current is running too hard to let the chum hit the bottom or to attract any fish. It's kind of hard because the current usually runs at like 1.5 knots to 2 knots.
Yeah, right.
And in those situations, the chum's out of the rig because these are very small. I would probably say that the usual rig at the surface level is probably 50 square yards, so maybe 50 meters in 50 square meters in area. So it's not a big area, and when you have a 2 knot current ripping through there, it takes the chum off maybe 100 yards off of the rig.
And that's
by the time it hits the bottom.
And that current, that presents like risks in itself, doesn't it? So are you guys running reel guns, or you've got shorter float lines? Like how do you minimise the risk of entanglement in these rigs?
It's really hard. So you never really want to run a float line in the rig, just because when you get inside, so you want to dive inside the rig. So you're actually diving underneath the platform. And so to take a float line in there, you have the potential to get hung up on a lot of stuff. So we're all diving reels. And I've started to do, I've actually thought about doing it recently, is doing a belt reel to reel. Because sometimes, your whole gun gets jammed up, and then, it would just be easier to clip a belt reel onto that too. Yep. But usually we dive reels, just straight reels, with very thick Dyneema or Spectra. Yep. Our shooting lines are usually either 400-pound mono or actually cable, because you get a snapper wrapped around that rig. All it's got to do is pull, or a cobia. And it's usually what we use the cable for, is a cobia. You get a cobia pull, wrap around a rig leg, you're gonna lose your whole shaft. You're gonna lose your whole rig. So with that cable, it's a lot easier to keep your fish, but at the same time, it really increases that entanglement aspect, and that's kind of sketchy part of it too. I really do think that diving the rigs is really inherently dangerous, but
as you found out, I guess, yeah.
So when you're taking other guys out that probably aren't familiar with diving structure, what's some of the advice that you give them in the boat on the way up?
We just tell them to stick close to us. We give them small guns so they can't shoot big fish.
that way it saves them competing with you too.
We give them a small gun so they can't shoot big fish, and then usually we do like to take some new guys out there, and there's a spawn coming up. We call it our snapper spawn. Where the red snapper, you'll shoot 20-pound red snapper only 10 feet from the surface.
Wow.
And that's a really nice time to take the new guys out and get them really stoked on shooting big fish. But maybe they don't realize that you can only do that twice a year. So
yeah, right.
Before you mentioned with so much structure around and you're heading up, and potentially you've been in the middle of the structure or whatever, you can hit your head.
Yeah.
And so that was another good insight into diving that much structure. The only structure we sort of dive might be the odd jetty or
wrecks.
Shipwrecks. And, and we find that the best fish will quite often be on the up current side of wrecks. Do you get the same sort of stuff with rigs?
I agree. The bigger fish will always stage on the up current side, which makes it even more of the pain in the ass to try to get them.
That's what I was thinking. You got all the structure in front of you. All the fish are on the other side of it, but you can't really set up on the other side of it because it's so dangerous.
One good technique that we use is that when the current's really bad, these rig legs are quite large. They're maybe 5 feet or 4 feet in diameter. We'll just hide behind them. We'll kick in the current till we get right behind them, and then we'll hide in the current behind them and grab on to a barnacle or something behind them, and then we can do our breathe up there. But the problem is that once you dive, you're not protected by it anymore, and then you got to kick against the current. But at least you get a good breathe up.
Yeah.
Cool. I like that.
And what's the go? You've done your dive. You're at the back end of the rig. What, you just have the boat and you do another, like essentially a drift, or you guys?
No, you got to swim back up.
You're doing it the hard way, man. I'd never do that.
Oh, that
Yeah,
sounds
no, the boat's tied off to the rig, so the boat's not moving.
Yeah, I guess no one wants to be boaty. Yeah, right. It's a fair call.
All right, cool. That was a
that was awesome.
Veterans Vault. I really enjoyed that, Ben.
Today's Veterans Vault was brought to you in partnership with Penetrator Fins. Spearfishing is all about self-improvement, but there are some things you can buy off the shelf that are going to help you with your diving. Penetrator blades are lighter and more reactive, and they've improved my diving, and I'm sure they're going to improve yours.
Yeah, I've recently switched over to Penetrator carbons, and it's made a big difference for me. I put much less energy in and get a much greater output, meaning that they're an effective fin. They're lightweight and comfortable, meaning that I spend more time on the bottom.
So check out Penetrator blades at penetrator.com, or check out our new Noob Spearo Edition Penetrator blade at noobspearo.com.
So Ben, what's the funniest thing you've experienced out spearfishing? Have you got a memorable story?
I was looking through your notes, and one of the things I saw was a poo story, and I got a pretty good poo story.
Seems two in a row.
It's awesome.
Two.
I was heading back from the Bahamas, and that night, I drank a little bit, and I was just kind of just churning down there, and I said, guys, we got to stop. And he goes, man, we're in the middle of the Gulf Stream right now. The Gulf Stream is a pretty big current, pretty fast moving current. We're also in 9,000 feet of water, so I was like, I gotta go, guys. So we stopped the boat, and I jumped in, and I dropped the wetsuit, and took a dump in 9,000 feet of water. So I think that's the fastest moving and deepest dump I've ever taken in my entire life. Sent it straight to England.
Deepest. Okay, so I've taken some notes here. Ben, I've put churning gut Choi with the deepest dump in the world, sent it straight to England. So
that's his second
English
record.
Listeners will be impressed with that.
He's got a Jack Crevalle record and the deepest dump in history. He's going for all the good stuff.
He's breaking all the Noob Spearo records here.
My claims to fame right there.
Oh, awesome. Churning gut Choi. That's how I'm going to head up this episode, I think. Oh, good, man. Next question. What's in your dive bag? Head to toe, what equipment are you wearing on one of these sort of trips out to the oil rigs?
I just wanted to preface this whole section. I'm not very big into gear.
Okay.
I usually get all my gear from one spot, and I just trust Andrew pretty much to tell me if it works or not.
He's a good man. He'll look after you.
Yeah.
Andrew's a good friend of mine, and I ask him, well, what should I do? And he just tells me, okay, you need this, and I buy it. So
keep it simple. All right,
tell us the crappy soldier.
A.B. Miller.
So my gun, my go-to gun is Andre spear gun. It's a Euro 120. I've had this gun for almost 8 years now. Andrew sold it to me 8 years ago, and it's been an amazing gun. Shoots very hard. It doesn't kick any. It tracks amazing. It's just a very good-looking, all-teak kind of gun. I like it a lot, and I don't think I would trade it for anything else in its class. Cool. That being said, I also got the 144 Euro from Andre, and I use that for bigger fish when I need a little more kick. But for my area and the visibility that I shoot, the Andre 120 I think is a very, very good gun. As far as my wetsuit, I use a Nautilus Mantis 5 mil. It's got that Yamamoto neoprene, and it's kept me extremely warm in the winters. and it's probably the best wetsuit I've ever worn in my entire life. You know, I've worn a lot of wetsuits, and it's, as far as maneuverability, flexibility, and warmth, it's a very good wetsuit.
Cool.
My mask, I actually don't know what kind of mask I wear. I just showed up to Nautilus one day, and Andrew said, "Okay, you got a big face, so you're gonna wear this one." So that's the story behind that mask.
Love your honesty.
Yeah. That's good.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. I think.
Well, Chris Coates has got a small one, doesn't he?
Oh, that's awesome. I love it.
It is good.
So, some dudes we talk to are real gear guys, Ben, and me personally, I'm not a gear guy either, although I know what I'm using most of the time. But I think I'm going to give guys advice that, you know, when they say, what sort of spear gun should I buy? It's a big one. No, all good. All right, what other sort of memorable bits of gear that do you really like?
You know, I'm not like, you know, super big into the gear, but there's a few like gear items that really stand out. Is that wetsuit, that gun, and then finally my fins is these Nautilus carbons that Andrew carries with these Bouchot foot pockets. And I cannot like say anything bad about these Bouchot foot pockets. They're so light, they're so comfortable, they're so flexible. I used to have other foot pockets before. I've gone through 3 different pairs. They give me blisters all over my feet. You know, they're super heavy.
Yep.
These Bouchots, they just feel like I'm walking on air. I can't really, you know, I don't even use socks when I wear them.
Oh wow.
Yeah, even in the dead of winter, when I went to the Bahamas last month for 3 days, you know, no blisters, and I didn't wear socks, and I was swimming on the surface, you know, probably 80% of the time.
Yeah, right.
So, really a big fan of the Bouchot foot pockets.
All right, cool. Have to check those out. All right, Ben, now it's time for the Fast 5 Facts for Noobs. So this is where we get you to give us a quick, rapid-fire 5 pieces of advice for new guys starting out.
So number 1, take a free diving course.
Yep.
Number 2, don't put too much expectations on yourself.
Okay.
Number 3 is Spearos are still fishermen, so everybody lies. So don't believe all the stories you hear.
Love it.
Number 4 is dive with a lot of people in different environments. It'll make you better.
Okay.
And number 5 is know the risks involved in the sport before you start to step out of your comfort zone.
That's really good. That's a great Fast 5.
Brilliant. Who's going to read them back? Who took notes?
I took notes, Turbo.
Go.
So number 1 was take a free diving course. Number 2 was don't put too much expectation on yourself. You prefaced that earlier with like Facebook and Instagram, like don't compare yourself. Number 3 was Spearos are like fishermen, and everyone's like Turbo, they all lie. Number 4, dive with different people in different environments that will help you improve, except, you know, obviously don't dive with Turbo because then you'll find out the truth. Number 5, be aware of the risks.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm pretty sure he didn't talk about me for 3 of those.
You did ask me to read them. So,
But anyway.
All right, cool.
Thanks for thinking of me, buddy. So,
hey, Ben, if you had a call to action to our audience, what would you like them to do? Is I mean, obviously, there's your video that's well worth having a look at. It's got over 120,000 views already. Like, it's made a big impact, and I think people have learned a lot out of it, regardless of some of the perhaps negative feedback you've received. Have you got another call to action?
You know, it's just one thing I really would love all your listeners to do is make sure that you get into a regimented buddy diving system, you know, and if you don't know what that is, I would suggest taking a free diving course, but always, you know, have somebody on the surface, whether you're doing, you know, a rotation of 2, 1 up, 1 down, or you know, 2 up, 1 down, you know, always have somebody on the surface to spot you, and always dive with a buddy. You know, it's just a really bad feeling, you know, like wanting to go home. Really bad feeling going home with with somebody that, going home without somebody, because they blacked out and you can't find them, or having to look for them.
Yeah,
you know. And nobody wants that. We do this for fun. We do this for enjoyment and the adrenaline rush, and I get it. But, it's at the end of the day, it's our obligation to our friends and our family to go home to them. And, and it saved my life having a buddy on the surface. So, I'm sure it would save. It's actually already saved. I've gotten a few private messages through YouTube and Facebook saying, hey man, I started diving with a buddy on the surface, and because of your video, and I just want to let you know, I blacked out the other day, and
wow,
and because I saw your video, it saved my life. So
wow.
Good work.
And it's messed with my head, or it's messed with my diving or whatever. But at the end of the day, even if it saved one person's life, and it's all worth it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
All
good
right,
message.
Ben. Thanks for coming on the show, Ben. Really got a lot out of it. Really enjoyed talking with you about all things structure and oil rigs and your blackout experience. Thanks for coming and sharing with us.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. You guys have a great show. I love the energy. I love your guys' fun little comments and everything. So
cool, mate. Thanks for talking to us.
Yeah. All right. Cheers, Ben.
All right. Take care.
Shrek, why don't you tell our listeners how they can save some money on spearfishing gear?
Well, Adreno have partnered up with Spearo to offer listeners $20 off all purchases over $200.
And how do they take advantage of this deal, mate?
Listeners can use the code Spearo at checkout online at spearfishing.com.au, or they can use it in store at the Brisbane or Sydney stores.
Excellent. And that code is Spearo.
That's right, Spearo. Thanks for listening today, guys. Hope you got a lot out of Ben's interview. It was pretty cool just thinking about diving these big oil rigs and stuff off Texas, like 130 feet of water with mud on the bottom. It'd just be a really sort of different diving experience from what Turbo and I are normally used to. So hope you got a lot out of that. Next week, we continue on with our 101 spearfishing series. So Turbo and I aren't doing an interview, but we're chatting about Turbo's personal experience with ciguatera poisoning. Now, I've heard him whinging and moaning. So look, we go pretty deep into sort of what happens to you when you get ciguatera poisoning and maybe how to avoid it and some possible treatment options. It's a great chat. Join us.
Thanks for listening to today's show. Make sure to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. To learn more about becoming a better Spearo, visit us at noobspearo.com and subscribe to our newsletter.